Welcome to the China Influencer Marketing Podcast. Each week, we speak with top influencers, marketers, and brands who share their experiences, strategies, and tactics for influencer marketing in China. Here's your host, Lauren Hallanan.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the China Influencer Marketing Podcast. This will be the first of 2 episodes with Michael Norris, Consumer Research Manager at Resonance China. Originally, he and I had planned on recording just 1 episode, but we had so many topics we wanted to cover that the call ended up lasting nearly 2 hours, so I thought it would be better to break it into 2 episodes. The first half of the interview, today's episode, is all about e-commerce. First, we go over the best platforms for luxury e-commerce in China and dive specifically into Secoo and why this underrated dark horse needs to be on your radar. Then we shift over to one of the hottest topics of the year, in China that is, which is e-commerce mini programs. Michael shares 5 rapidly growing e-commerce mini programs that you've probably never heard of, and he shares why they are such a big deal. Then we talk about the trend of WeChat influencers opening mini program shops, as well as the company Look, who is powering the infrastructure behind many of these top WeChat influencer shops. Before we start, I just want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, Parkloo. Parkloo is China's premier influencer marketing platform. Learn more at parkloo.com. And now, on to our interview with Michael. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the China Influencer Marketing Podcast. I'm really excited to have you on today. It would be great if you could start off the podcast by just introducing yourself and telling everybody a little bit about who you are and what you're currently up to.
Sure. So first and foremost, Lauren, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. It's a real pleasure. I am currently the Consumer Research Manager at Resonance China. Resonance China is a full-service digital marketing agency with a couple of points of difference. The first is that it primarily services luxury and lifestyle brands, so think of Tiffany, Bose, Calvin Klein, Singapore Airlines. And the second difference is that it has an in-house research team called SMART. So I'm the Consumer Research Manager that's in that team. And the result of this sort of turnkey solution of research leading into social media strategy and activation is that all of our digital marketing solutions are grounded in insight. Before joining Resonance, I had a deep connection with China and still do. So I was the youngest executive committee member on the Australia-China Business Council, and I was also fortunate enough to receive a Prime Minister Asia Award, which in Australia is the equivalent to maybe your Fulbright or the Rhodes Scholarship for any English listeners, which allowed me to do intensive study at Tsinghua University in Beijing. And when I'm not working and when I'm not in the field, I'm a bit of a content creator. So I write for Campaign Asia. I've been interviewed by you for Jing Daily. Yep. I write full-length Chinese articles for The Australian, and I've been fortunate enough to contribute to a couple of business of fashion articles as well. So that's me.
Awesome. I gotta admit, I'm envious of your job. It just sounds so amazing. Like, you get to research Chinese consumers and social media, digital marketing. It's like, that's my jam right there. So I gotta admit, you got a pretty great job.
It is absolutely fascinating. Really enjoying it.
That's awesome. I want to get, dive into the topics that we want to cover today, because we do have quite a lot of them, and I'm excited to talk about these. Some of these things I don't think we've gone into as much on the show. And some of them aren't directly related to influencer marketing, but they do have an impact and a connection to influencer marketing. So I think they're still extremely relevant to cover on this show. So
Okay.
I wanted to start off. You had mentioned, and I've seen you've been writing some articles or LinkedIn posts about this as well. But just that luxury e-commerce platform. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So luxury e-commerce in China is a big topic. Luxury e-com is already the biggest e-commerce market in the world. So it broke the US $1 trillion mark in 2016. And one of the platforms that often escapes the media spotlight, or at least the Western media spotlight, is Secoo, which has been around in China for about 10 years, but it's only just coming to Western media attention. So it has the largest market share in luxury e-commerce in China, so about 25%, according to some data sets. It originally started selling secondhand luxury, but now 95% of its items are new. And what's really interesting about Secoo is that they offer a little bit more than the others insofar as, in addition to luxury products, like you've got your bags, shoes, watches, and jewelry, Secoo also offers food experiences, beverage experiences. You can purchase art and antiques on the platform. And what's really interesting is that you can also purchase tickets to activities. So, for instance, you can purchase a ticket to the Shanghai Fashion Show on the platform. Another interesting thing about this platform is that it's trialing offline experience stores. So this idea of internet giants or previously only internet players moving into physical presences, Secoo in that respect is right at the forefront. Apart from Secoo, there are the other players. The major players include Luxury Pavilion. So that's Alibaba's e-commerce luxury play, invite only based on previous expenditure. And the idea is that it's looking to replicate the brick and mortar luxury stores' brand exclusivity and shopping experience. And as an extension to that, in April this year, it launched the Luxury Pavilion Club. So the idea behind this is to give Luxury Pavilion members access to exclusive events, things like priority purchase and other benefits. In terms of the brands, it's slightly ahead of JD's Top Life. So it's got more than 50 brands on the platform at the moment, and it's got big names. So the Burberrys, the Givenchys, the Hugo Bosses, and the La Mers of the world. And according to its own data sets, now I'm not sure about the veracity of these, but we'll go with them. Alibaba reckons that over 100,000 members of Luxury Pavilion spent more than 1 million RMB on luxury products on that platform last year, which is an incredible amount given that it's only just started in August 2017. Of course, where there's Alibaba, there will be Jingdong, and sure enough, Jingdong launched Top Life in October 2017. It's got about 40 brands on the platform, but interestingly enough, half of those brands are entering China for the first time. So a good example of this is Alexander McQueen and Balenciaga. So that's the first time that they've ever entered China, and they do so with Jingdong. Now, there's a real gap here. So only 24% of the world's luxury brands are represented on Tmall, and only 10% are represented on Jingdong. So if Jingdong can push to have these brands that are luxury brands that are looking to enter the China market for the first time and do the hand-holding when it comes to e-commerce and the logistics and things like that, that could be a real way for them to differentiate themselves and accumulate a lot of smaller but more niche luxury brands. So it's certainly two different ways to play there. So Alibaba have gone with the invite only, whereas Jingdong through Top Life are looking to curate smaller, more niche luxury brands. Outside of those two, what makes up the numbers in terms of market share is Farfetch and Net-a-Porter. I suppose the main difference between those two is that Farfetch is Jingdong affiliated. So in 2017, Farfetch received around $400 million in investment from Jingdong. And the other difference is that Farfetch doesn't own any of its own stock. So Net-a-Porter has a traditional wholesale model. It purchases merchandise and then sells to customers on its platform, whereas Farfetch takes a cut of what it sells on the platform. So it works on a commission basis, typically in the range of 25 to 30%. So those are the leaders, I suppose, in terms of market share and profile. And it's really interesting to see the different ways that they're looking to play. So some are experimenting with offline, others are exclusive invitation only. They're opening up rewards programs, and then others, of course, are looking to play smaller, more niche luxury brands in the hope of crafting a more sort of a curated style image. So a really interesting sort of space.
Okay, yeah, that is. I've got quite a few questions. So,
yeah, sure.
So first of all, I want to clarify for Farfetch and Net-a-Porter, Chinese consumers are typically going on their websites. Like, they're not on one of these marketplaces, right? Chinese consumer is usually going through the Farfetch website or the Net-a-Porter website to purchase products, correct?
Yeah, so that's the main method of entry for those two, correct?
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure, because I think some of the other ones are, their marketplaces, their platforms, whereas I think Farfetch and Net-a-Porter are still more website based, from my understanding.
Yeah, so there's web based, and then I think that there's apps for both available as well.
Okay. And then, so you were mentioning that for Taobao and JD that Taobao, that 25% of, I think you said 25% of luxury brands worldwide are on Taobao, and then 10% are on JD. So what about Secoo? How many do they have? And then these brands that are these luxury brands that are on Taobao and JD, are some of them also on Secoo, or is Secoo targeting other brands? Because, sorry, this is rambling a bit, but I think that sometimes, if a brand agrees to be on Taobao, they're probably not allowed to be also on JD or other platforms. Like, Taobao probably wants them to be exclusive. So I'm just curious about who is working with Secoo. Sorry, that was a lot of questions all in one.
Yeah, so just to clarify, on Tmall, there's 24% of the world's luxury brands. On JD, there's 10%. And so with Secoo, Farfetch, and Net-a-Porter, there are overlaps between the brands that are on there. So Secoo does have some of those larger brands. What you are referring to about this idea of exclusivity, so there was an incident last year called 二选一, so this idea of you've got to pick between the two, where it was reported that Alibaba, when it was negotiating with various vendors in the fashion space, made it the point that you had to be exclusively part of the Alibaba ecosystem. What happened subsequent to that was that the relevant authorities came out and said that there is there's increased scrutiny of uncompetitive practices online. And so everyone's dialed back on this idea of you have to be exclusive with me. Instead, what it is now is this idea of being first on a particular platform. So Hugo Boss is a great example of a brand that sits across Secoo, Luxury Pavilion, and JD, but the SKUs that are on each of those slightly differs. So that's where brands can juggle both or multiple suitors, is to be able to promise certain SKUs to a particular platform and promise other SKUs to another platform. So that's how they're navigating it at the moment. There is pressure when you negotiate with the platforms first up to be affiliated with them for as long as possible. You can't call it an exclusive arrangement, but you can certainly say that it's a China first arrangement. But yeah, it's the sort of open. Well, you have to be me or the other. Has certainly received a little bit of blowback from the competition watchdog.
Okay. Yeah, because I've just heard some things before about Taobao, and just that I guess that concern from brands that, if I go with Taobao, then I need to go all in on Taobao, and I'm kind of unable to take advantage of other platforms. I think there is still a bit of that I don't know if it's a misunderstanding, because like you said, maybe things have changed, but I think that concern is still definitely out there. So I think I also wanted to ask a question about the experiences from Secoo. It sounds that it's a little bit like Airbnb experiences, but focused on luxury. So because I think that Airbnb is working to develop their experiences, but I guess they aren't focused on the luxury segment. Do you think there's any competition there, or do you think that's not really an issue?
I think where the lack of differentiation comes from is potentially within the luxury e-commerce segment itself. So I would be concerned if I were working for Secoo Luxury Pavilion or Top Life, insofar as all three are now promising or have put in motion these sort of exclusive experiences. So, for instance, spas at affiliated hotel chains, or sort of Michelin star dining experiences, personal shopping experiences, or personal sort of wardrobe makeovers. If they all do that and there's no differentiation between the services, except for the fact that, it's a different hotel chain, you get your spa done at the Marriott instead of the Four Seasons, then I would actually be worried in that sense. The value of those membership programs is determined by how much exclusivity you can bring, and that exclusivity is diminished when there's three or more platforms in the luxury e-commerce space offering the same thing, as well as sort of Airbnb style experiences, which have their own merit and their own, I guess, attraction or point of attraction. The idea of being able to ride around in a Beijing Hutong with somebody who knows it, and to be sort of zipping through is actually quite cool. And so if we're talking about exclusivity and differentiation, then the luxury platforms may run into a little bit of trouble if they're simply carbon copies of one another. There does need to be some serious thought given to the extent to which they're going to copy what works, and then and at the same time offer differentiated value to consumers, especially in that luxury segment.
Right. Agreed. The Luxury Pavilion Club.
Yes.
I don't know if there's any data out about it, but how significant or successful has it? I mean, I know that the Luxury Pavilion, but the Luxury Pavilion Club, which you referred to, is something a little bit different, that came out. I'm thinking in April of this year.
Right. April, that's right.
Right. I wrote an article about it back then, and I haven't been too good about following up on it to look for any data since, but it just seemed like they were making a big splash about nothing that really exciting. They're saying, oh, you can, there'll be special offers and you'll be invited to special events and things like that. And to me, it felt like they were just adding more instead of improving the things that they're already providing, or working even more to make sure that their products are extremely authentic and their services are really solid. To me, it just felt like fluff, and I didn't know how you felt about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting little event, because what I understand is that the Luxury Pavilion Club was launched in April, on the very same week that Top Life had its official launch party. So the announcement of the Luxury Pavilion Club was made on the Wednesday. The Top Life launch party, where they invited all the brands that had signed up, and Liu Qiangdong, the head of Jingdong, was going to be there to cut the ribbon, was on the Friday. So it may have been a little bit of preemptive PR from the folks at Alibaba to try and deflect at least some of the media attention that that Jingdong's Top Life would be receiving that week. I was also a little bit skeptical of the offer, insofar as the Luxury Pavilion Club has two tiers. The first tier is available to all Luxury Pavilion Club members who are already there by invitation only. So
right.
It was kind of like you sort of cock your head and you go, did I read that right? And then there's the second tier, which is a pay for play. Now, whether that second tier and what it provides is enough for people to dish out additional dollars and then consequent upon that maybe spend more on the platform, I think is something that needs to be tested. I'm also in the same camp as you, Lauren, insofar as I'm waiting for the data to come out that says Luxury Pavilion Club at the sort of the diamond tier, they spend so many RMB more than those who are just normal members of the Luxury Pavilion. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not it does lead to a substantial difference in purchase behavior. But at the moment, until we get our hands on that data, the jury's out. But you're absolutely right. There is it did seem a little bit overworked and contrived at the time. But as far as I understand, there was a reason behind that, and that was to dilute some of the PR that Jingdong and Top Life would be getting in the same week.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes a little bit of sense. So one more thing I want to ask about on this topic, and then maybe we'll move on to a different one, is just because I do think that Secoo is becoming or is already a very big player in this space. And so I just was wondering if you could, you've kind of explained a little bit, but is there anything about them that's really unique? What is allowing them to carve out a space in this already very competitive industry? Like, what is it that they have really done differently? Sure.
If I'm to boil it down with two things, the first is that they have early mover advantage insofar as they've been involved in the luxury industry for 10 years. They did a pivot partway through with from the second-hand luxury to new, but the fact is that they have been in the industry for quite some time, and that leads to an accumulated advantage when it comes to resources, connections with brands, connections with influencers and the like. The second thing that I think they've done well is that they understood very early on that the luxury experience in China is more than just a brand name handbag or the latest pair of shoes. It's crafting that exclusivity and being able to support that sort of very aspirational high-end lifestyle with the additional value-added services. So the food, the beverages, the art, the antiques, and so on and so forth. I think that go-to-market strategy and the implementation, as well as the selection of some of their offline experience stores, has been a little bit ahead of its time. Even if you compare it to what some of the luxury platforms have done in the West, it still doesn't quite compare to what Secoo offers and what Secoo is covering when it comes to its sort of brand plus experience one-stop shop. Now, whether that gives it a competitive continuous advantage going forward there's a big question mark there, especially when you've got the significant sort of per head spend of Top Life and Luxury Pavilion. So just as an indication, your average spend on Secoo will be around 800 RMB. But when you're on Luxury Pavilion or Top Life, you're somewhere between 2,000 to 5,000 RMB on average. So whether it can continue that momentum with a smaller average spend but higher volume, as opposed to a high average spend but smaller volume, remains to be seen.
Okay, yeah, that clarifies some things. And have they had any issues with fakes in the past, or are they pretty well known for having real items? Have they run into that at all?
Look, what I think all of the platforms have done really well is the authenticity. So I think that factor and the measures that they've taken, whether it is sort of no questions asked return or providing the certificates or sort of the brand endorsement on the page, and it's verifiable via a QR code, or you can inquire with a relevant brand representative, what have you. I think all that has been done really well, and it sort of serves as a really nice contrast between maybe some of the other e-commerce platforms, including ones that are run by Alibaba or that have been invested by both Alibaba and Jingdong. It just sort of sets them apart in that gold standard for authenticity. So that aspect, I think, has been done well, and it continues to show how serious at least some of these platforms, especially those who are leading the category, are at sort of crushing these sort of counterfeiting rumors, or the fact that counterfeit goods may exist on their platforms somewhere in some dark corner of their platforms. They're in the luxury e-commerce segment, all have done really well, right from Secoo, Luxury Pavilion, Farfetch, Net-a-Porter. They've all done well. It's a really positive sign, actually, for brands and consumers alike.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's that they've been listening to consumers,
Sure.
Because I know that's always a huge issue for Chinese consumers. So I think that's very smart
Correct.
of them.
And now it's time for this week's Parkloo Influencer Marketing Insights. Today I'm going to share 4 of 8 tactics for maximizing your influencer marketing campaign's value. Number 1, repurposing influencer creative. Always negotiate the right to republish influencers' creative on your other social accounts. Number 2, hire influencers to create content, not distribute it. It's much more affordable to work with influencers as content creators, and social content is in their DNA. Number 3, engage with the comments. It's a waste not to engage with influencers' followers. Answer their questions, give them feedback. Number 4, optimize the post for SEO, search engine optimization, social search optimization, and e-commerce search engine optimization. Maximize the effect of your campaign. To dive deeper into these tactics or to learn about the other 4, please visit us at chinainfluencermarketing.com/Parkloo. Now enjoy the rest of your podcast.
Okay, well, I want to move on to one of our other topics, so this is also kind of a big topic in and of itself, but it's WeChat, and I know that this is also related to e-commerce, but just that, we hear so much these days about WeChat mini programs, about WeChat e-commerce. There's a lot going on in this space, and so I would love to hear what your thoughts are on any trends that are going on right now with mini programs, with mini program e-commerce, just with the whole space.
Well, I mean, the big thing for 2018 is definitely WeChat e-commerce. It's huge. I mean, Pinduoduo just IPO'd the weekend before our interview, so and that was born completely out of WeChat e-commerce. So it certainly is one of the big themes of 2018. But before we go into that, it's just worth understanding the sort of the state of play when it comes to WeChat mini programs. Since their introduction, which is a little bit, what are we at now? So a year, the time flies. So we're at about a year, and I'm going to be adventurous and say a year and 6 months, a year and a half ago, we've had mini programs were introduced. Now we're looking at over a million mini programs with something like 600 million accumulated users, which is absolutely exponential growth. If you were to sort of graph it out, it's certainly got that hockey stick look to it. And the average time on a mini program or on all mini programs that a user would use in a day is sitting at about 13 minutes. Now, we've got to remember that the average use of WeChat is 50 minutes per day. So 13 of those 50 minutes are spent in a mini program environment, which is so that sets the scene. And then once we've sort of understood that these things are being used for travel, for purchases, for services and the like, then we start to understand the e-commerce opportunity and where e-commerce sits. So the best example of that was Jingdong's equivalent of Singles Day, which is a 618. And during that period, there was 160 million entries into a shopping-related mini program. So remember that we had 600 million accumulated users, and then all of a sudden you've got 160 million entering during that 18 days. So the take-up for that shopping event has been enormous. The number of orders through mini programs increased 60 times, and the most important thing, I think, from a Jingdong and an e-commerce perspective was that 40% of the 160 million entries into a shopping-related mini program resulted in a share. That's unheard of when you come to any sort of digital marketer would be able to say for a piece of content to be shared 40% of the time that it is opened is nothing short of a miracle. So what we're looking at here is a big tick when it comes to the success of employing mini programs for these big shopping events. The question, I think, is whether or not it will become the main mode of shopping as opposed to an app. So so if you compare the number of people that enter, for instance, the Jingdong app as opposed to the number of people that enter the Jingdong mini program in a given month, the app is still clearly the winner. But for these e-commerce festivals, and there's more and more of them as you would know, it seems that the mini program, at least this year, has been a big hit. So that's the first thing, this sort of massive success that we saw through 618. The second is this broader theme of WeChat e-commerce, which really refers to this kind of Pinduoduo, not the exact same model, but the idea or the concept behind it, which is you share links to stuff in WeChat and people are more likely to open it up, purchase, and buy it. So there's been a lot of attention on these WeChat-only e-commerce platforms. Pinduoduo started in WeChat but has an app, and there's 5 other platforms now that received Series B funding in the last 6 months. And these platforms are only WeChat. So they only operate in WeChat. They're either marketplaces or they help people sell stuff in WeChat. So those 5 platforms are 爱库存、好衣库、小优店、云集 and 好物满仓. So I apologize that they're all in Chinese, but that's just how new this thing has been. There hasn't been enough or sufficient Western media attention for them to be dubbed or given sort of Romanized names.
Yeah, maybe when later on you can share those with me, and I can include that in the show notes so that people can copy paste and look it up for if they're interested.
Yeah, sure. That'd be great. Now, there's 5 of those platforms, and without going into sort of excruciating detail, what they do or what they're aimed at doing is setting up Taobao-esque marketplaces and stores within WeChat. So the boffins call it S2 little b 2C. So that is supplier, little b business to customer. Now, why is it little b? Because it could be a KOL, it could be an individual, it could be someone who sells things online to make a buck, like a store owner or a daigou or what have you. And the model is that the supplier, so these platforms, these Chinese platforms, purchase older inventory from brands. So that helps brands clear inventory that they can't sell anywhere else. And the supplier's scale allows little b to acquire this inventory at a lower cost than they would than they would have by going it alone. So that's better margins for your kind of like your Taobao store owner. So what these platforms encourage or facilitate is being able to set up the equivalent of your Taobao store in WeChat. So the previous term was called Weidian, but whether or not that term continues, I'm not quite sure. But the idea of setting up a We shop inside WeChat and being able to sell stuff through there. Now, the different platforms differ in terms of how they will encourage you to sell and the sort of the support they give you. So some give cashbacks. So for instance, Lauren, if I shared something with you that sat in my Weidian and I had just started and I successfully make a sale, the platform will actually give me an additional $1 incentive to sort of say, good job, Michael, keep going selling stuff. And then if you go on and you refer that to a friend, you can also make a couple of RMB from the sale as well. Now, one of the interesting things in the rise of these different platforms is that there has been some legal consternation as to whether or not it's kind of like a pyramid scheme or a Ponzi scheme. In Chinese, it's called 传销. So this idea of formulating a network that sells and continuously sells, and it's sort of a race to the bottom, with each person making the money that they make by referring it and sort of kicking the can down the road. So how these platforms manage that legality and then whether or not they're able to compete against each other. I mean, 5, 3 of which got Series B funding in the last 6 months. That's actually, it seems quite competitive to me, especially given that most Chinese consumers are adequately serviced by just a couple e-commerce apps. So this idea of 5 emerging in short periods of time, I mean, there's going to be inevitable consolidation there. But the basic model is trying to transplant Taobao and build on the success of Pinduoduo inside WeChat.
Okay. So I just want to, so you said a lot of this is like older merchandise that these stores are no longer selling. So these stores, the five that you mentioned, these are probably not like an opportunity for brands that are looking to get into China or anything like that. I mean, it's something to be aware of, but probably not something that they should consider, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So those that are looking to enter the China market, I don't think it's the solution for them. I think instead it's potentially a solution for brands that have trouble moving product on existing marketplaces. So, for instance, they may have a Tmall flagship, or they may have a flagship on Jingdong, and they find that a particular SKU is really difficult to move. Being able to offload that to these sort of platforms might be an opportunity to relieve some of the burden that comes with the logistics and the supply chain, but I don't think it's a go-to market strategy.
Okay, got it. So a little bit like I don't know how familiar if they have these in Australia, but a little bit like a TJ Maxx or a Marshalls or something like that. It's a lot of offloading previous merchandise, and then you can get it on sale. And so there might be some good quality stuff, but you never really know what you're going to get when you go on there.
Yeah, no, that's right. And so that, I think, is a nice offset to the Pinduoduo sort of thing, where there are certainly counterfeit goods on Pinduoduo, and it's copped a lot of blowback and flack for that. At least with these platforms, it seems what you're getting is the real deal, albeit it's out of stock. So it could be very similar to the Marshalls of the world and sort of retailers like that. But yeah, what we're seeing is, it seems, the models that we see in the real world, if we can call it that, in the sort of the physical retail world, so having the equivalents of the Costco's and Sam's Club and these sort of things, they're coming to the online world, and that's really interesting how online ecosystems seem to mimic offline ecosystems. So we've got an interesting time on our hands. At least the WeChat mini programs, it seems, are great for e-commerce festivals. It seems that social e-commerce, so the idea of I flick you something, you open and you buy it inside WeChat, and then we might receive a benefit from that sale, seems to be kicking off. So it's all guns blazing.
I agree. So I also want to know, what are your thoughts on influencers opening mini program stores and on brands opening mini program stores? Because, we kind of mentioned Pinduoduo and then these e-commerce platforms. Yeah. These are all separate platforms that are selling other brands' products. But what do you think about WeChat influencers launching stores or brands launching mini program stores? Are there any benefits? What do you think of that?
Yeah, so in terms of influencers opening their own WeChat mini program stores, I've written a lot on this, that I'm really excited by this development. I think it's a real game changer in a couple of ways. The first is that by influencers opening their own stores, it eliminates friction through redirects. So this idea that previously you would have to either copy a link or you would be redirected to somebody else's platform to complete the purchase, it eliminates that. Second, it gives influencers a clearer path to monetization. One of my friends operates Sugar and Spice, which is originally started out as a content platform with recommendations on clothing, and now they've monetized, they've built their own WeChat mini program shop, and they're able to maintain an average spend of around 2,000 RMB, which is, as you'll recall, this pretty much the same as a Top Life. Yeah. So that's amazing. That's a much clearer path for monetization for them than selling ads, for instance, and the challenge that's associated with sort of being having your own sort of commercial interest, as well as putting out good content and still maintaining that engagement. The folks down at Sugar and Spice are really enjoying that challenge. So good for them. And then the third one is, or the third aspect that this is a game changer, is that it opens up online e-commerce, especially around luxury and fashion, to new players like Look, which you've written about before, Lauren, and I wrote about right at the top of the year, but it was a Chinese language article. So Look, I really think when we're talking about other platforms, this is one that is in English and it should be on people's radar. Look provides the back-end support to KOL's WeChat mini program stores. Look is set up by ex-Alibaba chap called Yanming. Really clever guy. If you've got the opportunity to sort of Baidu him and have a look at some of his speeches, I would thoroughly encourage your listeners to do so. Really, really smart, switched-on guy. And sure enough, sort of influencers have seen the benefit of partnering with Look. So Look's managed to sign up some of the biggest names so far. So Go-Go Boy, Mr. Bags, Annie Style on top. And those influencers accumulated cover about 250 million WeChat users. So that's a fourth of WeChat's active monthly users, an incredible amount of reach. And a small challenge that I frequently throw down to people is have a look in WeChat search for Go-Go Boy. In WeChat search, see how many of your friends have liked Go-Go Boy or are following Go-Go Boy, more accurately, and then try with any other brand. So Givenchy, Gucci, Supreme, whatever, try with that brand as well. And if there's a brand that your friends follow more than Go-Go Boy the individual, I generally send them a red packet. That's how confident I am that those influencers will always come out on top in terms of their engagement with people that are on WeChat consistently.
Yeah, so, I'm looking at it right now. I haven't looked at other brands, but because I follow him, and I have 155 of my friends also follow him. So, you know, if that's any indicator, I mean, I don't know about usually other brands I know for a fact are nowhere near that amount. So usually it's like if I have like 20 other friends following another brand, that's kind of a lot.
No, that's right. And I mean, any sort of luxury brand, have a try. It's probably somewhere between the 20s and the 30s, just to give listeners an indication. And I mean, everyone's welcome to try it out on their own phones as well. But it's quite interesting to see the reach and the extension of these influencers. And you can repeat the exercise for any of the other names that Look have signed. And because of that reach, they're able to move product at an alarming rate. So Look's top fashion bloggers, especially those ones that I mentioned before, Go-Go Boy, Mr. Bags, etc., are able to move anywhere between 5 to 100 million RMB of stock per month. Now that's serious dollars. So there's real potential for Look by taking, I guess, a cut from each sale. There's real potential for it to spoil the party for those luxury e-commerce players that we discussed earlier. And if we look at the other trends that we're seeing inside WeChat e-commerce, so we talked about these other non-Alibaba, non-Jingdong platforms. So we've got a sort of almost a decentralization of e-commerce. We're getting distribution models that stretch through WeChat. And then we've got these KOLs that folks are really, really, really engaged with, and they're buying and they're moving stock super quickly. So whether or not that pulls the rug out from under Secoo, I think, is one of the more interesting questions in luxury e-commerce. And indeed, the sort of the ridiculous stories about influencers selling a certain number of bags at ridiculous prices, or even Mini Coopers was another thing. Yeah, Becky Lee, exactly. All those sales miracles, if we can call it that, come from people that are signed up to look. And so at that point, you sort of sit back and you go, well, gee, aren't they really an e-commerce dark horse? So if I know we'll include the names of the Chinese platforms in the show notes, but really look, it's an English one. It's got press about it from yourself, Lauren. So yeah, that's something that that your listeners can certainly have a read up on and
they really
think about.
have been flying under the radar, though. They really haven't done, at least in Western media, there really isn't that much information on them yet. And like you said, I mean, I think they are a dark horse, and they're I think it seems anyway, like they're kind of fine with flying under the radar. Like they don't necessarily need to promote that, hey, we're doing all this on the back end. I think the people that know about them, know about them, and the people that don't need to know about them don't know about them. It's kind of, they know that they just need the influencers in these brands to hire them, and that's really what matters. So
that's right. They're just happy to sort of sit there and take a cut and sort of be low key about it, which I think is really cool. Very different from the sort of the high flying entrepreneurs that sometimes we're faced with or come on our screens.
Definitely, yeah. I read a good article. It's in Chinese, but I'll link it up from Jiemian. And it was talking a lot about their just kind of this industry, but also a little bit about Look's journey and how they had originally started, because before mini programs existed, this has only been in the past year, not even year and a half, like we said, that mini programs have even been around. But Look has been around for longer than that, and originally they were doing other models that were similar, but they were just dealing with Weibo and Taobao and the other options that were out there, because this idea of a influencer that has their own brand or their own store has been around for a while, but previously it was all Weibo influencers that had Taobao stores. And like you said, I'm definitely gonna have to look into the founder more, because it seems like he really he saw mini programs, and it sounds like right away he was like, this is it, this is our opportunity. And if I'm remembering correctly from the article, that he just dropped everything else they were doing and was like, we're going all in on mini programs. This is what we're doing. And if you look at it, Go-Go Boy's mini program, I believe, was actually one of the first. I think he was one of the first influencers to come out with the mini program shop, and that was only a couple months, I think, after mini programs launched. And so they were really early movers, and so I definitely want to learn more about him, because I think it's really incredible what he's done in such a short amount of time, and to have the to be able to stand the risk of just saying, okay, well, everyone's kind of, because back when mini programs came out, everyone was saying, what are these things? Are they really going to work? That's right. And he just went all in. So I think it's really interesting.
And just to give an indication of how fast this has moved, I gave a presentation in April on WeChat e-commerce. And I was absolutely roasted in the Q&A, because it was kind of like, well, WeChat's had a very poor record with e-commerce. Why would I be buying stuff in WeChat when I buy stuff already from Taobao or Tmall or Jingdong? How is this all gonna work? And at the moment, at the time I was sort of thinking, oh, gee, doesn't that make a lot of sense? But I mean, what we're seeing, especially in the last 2-3 months, is that it really is something that is real and it's tangible. We're seeing it more and more, and I think it's kind of perverse that we think about this, because we generally regard luxury as a bit of a digital laggard, but luxury brands were the very first to set up WeChat boutiques. So that is this sort of your own brand.com version in WeChat on a mini program. And sure enough, in 2017, right at the end of the year, the Bain China Luxury Report came out and said that was the second most frequented channel for luxury purchases after brand.com official websites. So I was only hanging off of that, and it's interesting to see how far it's come since even April this year. I suspect that if I did the same talk now, everybody would sort of be shaking their heads and saying, well, yeah, tell me something I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny how people jump on board and change their minds so easily. But but things in China change so quickly, so it's also understandable. Right. So that kind of leads me to that second part of the question is, do you think that it's a good idea for brands to be opening their own stores, or is it better for them to work with these influencers? Or, what is it worth it to open a mini program store for brands, and what are the benefits? What do you think?
Yeah, good. I mean, it's a fantastic question. I'm afraid that I'm going to have to give one of those answers and say that it depends. For FMCG, I generally wouldn't recommend. There's no clear use case for a WeChat mini program for an FMCG brand. Consumers have this well-established practice of comparing the pair and shopping online, looking at the different specials. The only exception that I would make is maybe infant formula or other sensitive FMCG areas. So anything to do with infants, having a brand.com or a flagship presence that is available in WeChat, it certainly might be the way to go. But again, you've got to check this against your WeChat presence and pull. So if you're an infant formula brand and you've got very few followers on WeChat, then accumulating followers on WeChat and the traffic to your WeChat mini program will be quite costly, as opposed to running with what you've already got on Tmall, for instance. So for FMCG, generally no, but for sensitive areas where there is a case for authenticity or that brand.com experience, think about it, but then check the practicality of diverting traffic to an offshoot of your WeChat official account. That is to say that if you've got not very much of a following on WeChat, but you're doing okay on a Tmall or a Jingdong or a Kala or whatever, maybe stick with that. Then we go to the sort of the luxury, the athletic, cosmetics. That's where I would start to be more proactive. So this, as we talked about, this official account plus luxury was a quick winner for luxury brands, and I think consumers like that branded presence for instance, if you've got cosmetics or what have you, because you're already engaged with that particular brand, so you might be following them. Or have read an article that redirects quite nicely to the mini program. And then there's the assurance factor as well. So what we were talking about earlier about counterfeiting comes into play, so that it's a branded presence. It's the equivalent of a flagship store. So consumers have peace of mind when they purchase from that. It's authentic. But look, again, the proposition's the same. E-commerce enabled WeChat mini programs are deployed. You're really thinking to convert engagement into sales rather than this sort of discovery phase of the brand. It's unlikely that consumers are going to go from discovery to purchase. It's more likely that it's engagement into sales. So it's a great idea for brands in the luxury, athletic, or cosmetic space with a decent following, but not so good an idea for a brand in those same spaces that aren't on consumers' radar or are just being introduced into China. In that context, you may have to look at building up the noise and the buzz around the brand, and then doing that sort of accumulation, that process, before thinking about, oh, gee, what's the most frictionless way to be able to convert traffic that I've already got?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think a common thing that I have had to tell some brands that have come to me is just that, like, they're so concerned about, oh, which platform should we sell on? And I'm like, well, how's your brand awareness in China? Like, what have you done so far to build brand awareness? And they're like, well, not much. I'm like, do that first. Like, if Chinese consumers really want to buy your product, especially with luxury products, like they travel a lot. They use Daigou. They also can use English websites and ship internationally. Like, they will find a way to get your product if they want it. But if they don't even know about it, there's no point in my opinion, in opening up or worrying about which is the best e-commerce platform if no one has any awareness or the awareness is relatively low. It's just that, they focus on the wrong thing. I'm like, you should be putting all your money into generating awareness. And they're like, yes, but we want sales. And I'm like, you'll get plenty of sales if you first focus on, growing that awareness. Just, if you open a store and you've done nothing to generate awareness, then it's just going to be crickets. Like, it doesn't matter which platform you use. Nobody's going to go to the store. They're going to get no traffic.
Yeah. No, that's right. It's cart before the horse. And unfortunately for some of the small or the medium enterprises that are looking at the China opportunity, but maybe don't have lots of China knowledge or on the ground knowledge, it's a build it and they will come mentality. And, you do have to, as you say, do a little bit of reality checking with those clients and sort of tap them on the shoulder and say, I'm sorry, but that's 8 years ago. When traffic was easy to accumulate. Now, traffic's very difficult to accumulate. You've got a situation on all the e-commerce platforms where it is 10% of the stores or the shop fronts are winners, and then 90% are losers insofar as the traffic and the sales that they generate. And so the question is, well, how are you going to become part of the 10%? And that is built on engagement and awareness, rather than, we put a store there, we'll open up a WeChat and a Weibo and away we go. I think there's a lot more groundwork to be done, and unfortunately, there are some that look to take the easy route and are quickly sort of reminded by reality that you can't always get what you want. That's sort of, I apologize for singing, but I mean that sort of thing just really it brings them down to reality quite quickly. But the approach that you proposed, Lauren, is absolutely perfect. Get the awareness up, strategically engage the people that you've got to engage, whether it's a Daigou play, whether it's an influencer play, whatever it is. Get the buzz around the brand going, get it into consumers' hands, and incentivize them to share, whether it's through a great brand experience or whether it is doing the unscalable, that is following up. And sort of saying, well, you purchased this from us. How was it? I mean, sometimes you've got to do the unscalable early on when it comes to new product development, or whether it comes to market entry, to generate that really sort of strong engagement and get your first 1,000 true fans under your belt, and then you can look to achieve scale from there.
Completely agree. Hi, everybody. That is the end of the first episode with Michael Norris. Please stay tuned for our next episode where we continue to talk about a ton of really interesting topics. So please stay tuned. You can find Michael's contact info and links to many of the things we talk about in the show description or in the show notes on ChinaInfluencerMarketing.com. And I'd love to hear what you thought of the episode. You can leave me a comment on ChinaInfluencerMarketing.com or reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if you like this episode and know somebody else who might like it too, please don't forget to share it. Thanks, and talk to you next week.